The early mornings in my house had a familiar quietness, a gentle stillness wrapped in sunlight filtering through lace curtains and the soft creaks of old floorboards. These moments were mine, unhurried and calm, often spent in the garage where my classic car awaited. That car wasn't just metal and paint, it was a living memory, a symbol of my independence and countless adventures with my late husband. Its deep green color gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights, and the smell of aged leather and worn upholstery took me back to better days when the world felt wide open, full of possibility, and I was in control of my own path. I spent many afternoons there, tuning the engine, polishing the hood, remembering the laughter that had once filled the seats beside me. It was my refuge from the expectations and judgments of a world that too often expected me to fade quietly into the background. The car was a testament to my strength, a quiet statement that I was still here, still moving forward in my own time. Then, one afternoon, that quiet refuge was shattered. I noticed the garage door was closed, darker than usual. A sudden chill crept into my chest. I opened the door slowly, expecting to see my beloved car parked just as I always left it, but the spot was empty. The silence echoed louder than I could bear. The space where my memories and freedom had rested was now bare, cold, and silent. I searched the whole house, hoping for some explanation. A neighbor borrowed it, perhaps, or I had simply forgotten where I parked it. But the sensation that settled over me was unmistakable and dreadful. The car was gone. And only one person could have taken it without my knowledge: Sarah, my daughter. I walked the streets to her apartment, each step weighted with a mixture of confusion and betrayal. The years I spent working late nights, sacrificing my own dreams for hers, flashed like broken images before my eyes. I remembered how fiercely I had fought to provide for her, to give her a future I never had, never imagining she would one day dismiss me so coldly. When I knocked, she opened the door with that same self-assured look she always wore, careless, untouchable. In her hand, she held a set of keys that glinted carelessly in the sunlight. "I sold it," she said, her voice flat and dismissive. My breath hitched. "You sold my car without telling me?" Her eyes flicked away, as if my words were an annoyance she had neither time nor patience for. "Mom, you're too old to drive it. It was just collecting dust. I did what was best for you." Those words cut deeper than I ever expected. To her, my car was nothing more than an object, but to me, it was a living thread to my past, to the independence I fought so hard to hold on to. It was my freedom, my joy, and she had sold it away as if it were a trinket, as if I were the fragile old woman she claimed I was. The humiliation settled like a heavy stone in my chest. The daughter I raised now saw me as a burden, as someone to be managed and discarded. I felt invisible, dismissed altogether. But beneath that pain, something stronger stirred, a quiet fire kindling deep within. I wanted to scream at her, to plead, to remind her of who I was and what I had sacrificed. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, a profound stillness took hold. That moment of betrayal became crystal clear. They no longer saw me as the woman I was, just a shadow of the past confined by their assumptions. I turned away without another word, the weight of that cold dismissal shaping the way I looked at my own family. The walk home felt longer, each step echoing a silent question. How had I let myself be reduced to someone so easily discarded? At home, I entered the empty garage, the hollow space where my car had stood mocking me. The house, too, felt colder, stripped of the warmth that came from sharing joy and respect. I sat alone, surrounded by worn photographs and echoes of the past. The absence was culpable, not just of the car, but of the respect and love I had believed were my right. As the evening shadows grew longer, I reflected on my life. Years spent pouring myself into others, putting their needs above mine, accepting quiet erasure in the name of familial duty. But now, in the aching silence, I realized how much they had underestimated me, how easily they mistook my calm for weakness. The pain of betrayal was sharp, but below it lay a deep well of strength. Patience, resilience, and quiet grit that had carried me through decades of hardship were ready to surface. I would not let this loss silence me or diminish my will. That night, lying awake in the darkness, I whispered a promise to myself. This was not the end of my story, but the beginning of a new chapter. I would reclaim my independence, not with angry shouts, but with steady, deliberate steps. I whispered to the quiet around me, "Independence is my true horsepower. No one, not even my own daughter, would take that away from me." With a heart heavy yet resolved, I prepared myself for what lay ahead. I was no longer the woman who mourned what was lost. I was a mother ready to regain her life in silence and strength, ready to chart a new course for herself. Days melted into one another, each one wrapped in a quiet haze of thought and memory. In the immediate aftermath of the betrayal, I found myself sinking into a strange kind of silence, one not born from acceptance, but from shock and a carefully guarded reserve. It was as if my mind was caught in the pause between the clap of thunder and the first drops of rain, heavy with tension that had nowhere yet to break free. I didn't reach out to Sarah or Mark. I avoided the phone calls and the attempts to check in that felt more like a cold inspection than concern. I retreated instead into the sanctuary of my own space, where memories of the past intertwined with the weight of the present. The garage, now empty, haunted me every time I passed through. Sometimes I sat in the faded leather chair nearby just to feel close to what had been taken. The reason I chose silence was clear to me. Anger could be messy, revealing vulnerabilities I wasn't ready to expose. Crying into the phone or shouting at Sarah would have only given her the satisfaction of weakness, the very thing she seemed to believe I embodied. So I held my breath and waited, watching and listening quietly, as a strategist would before a move. In those quiet hours, reflections on my life began circling relentlessly. I thought about the sacrifices, the nights I stayed up balancing bills while Sarah slept safely in her room, the years I spent climbing my small business out of the ground so she wouldn't have to worry about money, the dreams I quietly shelved to make room for hers. My thoughts traced back to younger days, when I was fierce and unruly, untamed by the limits others tried to place on me. I saw the whole tapestry of my existence stretched between loss and love, betrayal and hope. There was a sharp dissonance between that young woman who once laughed freely, reckless and alive, and the quiet figure who now sat nursing a wound too deep for others to see. But even as nostalgia tugged at me, it became a tool rather than a trap. Those memories didn't chain me down. Instead, they became the foundation, a source of strength that refused to bend. Each evening, as I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by old photographs, I let the silence wrap around me like a cloak. The pictures told a story, years of celebrations, simple family dinners, and moments when joy was so pure it almost hurt. But I could no longer deny the fractures beneath the surface, the lies unspoken, the resentments carried secretly, the moments when Sarah's love had felt conditional and distant. That image of my daughter, the girl I had once held close to my heart, was now tangled with the woman who sold my car without so much as a conversation. The contrast was cruel. Yet, rather than sinking into despair, I found my mind sharpening in clarity. I refused to be a passive figure in this drama. The car was gone, yes, but the years of experience, the careful plans, and financial knowledge I had gathered were still mine. Those things wouldn't be swept away by a careless choice or a thoughtless betrayal. Slowly, I began turning those thoughts into plans. I wasn't the type to rush into decisions, and this time was no different. I reviewed my finances quietly, going through dusty folders and files with a growing sense of purpose. I found solace in numbers, the cold facts that could be counted, controlled, and turned into something useful. It was a form of silent resistance, a way to reclaim power where words failed me. In the evenings, I sometimes called an old friend, Clara, though I never fully explained the turmoil I was living through. Clara, a fellow traveler and kindred spirit, had a way of listening without judgment. She reminded me gently of the world beyond these walls, a world filled with roads yet traveled and opportunities yet seized. Her tales of adventures on the open road planted a seed of longing in me, a longing that grew with every conversation. While the house around me felt smaller, suffocating almost, my dreams grew larger. I imagined escape routes mapped out in dusty atlases and websites filled with photos of RVs and travel trailers. There was a freedom in those visions, a promise of control returning to me. I reflected, too, on the emotional cost of years spent bending beneath the weight of others' expectations. The late nights spent comforting Sarah through troubles I barely understood, the patience required to smooth over conflicts, the quiet endurance of family dramas that often left me feeling invisible. Those sacrifices had been made willingly, but the betrayal was a brutal reminder that love was complicated and not always reciprocal. And still I held on to hope. Not the blind hope of fairy tales, but a tough, pragmatic hope built on knowledge of who I was and what I could accomplish. I knew that to reclaim my life, I would need to be patient and deliberate, the kind of patience that doesn't wait passively but moves with quiet resolve. This resolve turned inward my gaze rather than outward. I became an observer of my own life, scrutinizing every detail, every opportunity that might be reclaimed from loss. What seemed like an ending was instead a prologue to transformation. I did not reject my memories or my family, despite the pain. Instead, I used that pain to fuel a new kind of strength, one that comes not from loud confrontation, but from steadfast, measured courage, the kinds of lessons life teaches quietly through experience and reflection. Every day became a step forward, small but significant. I sold pieces of jewelry that carried their own stories, packed away dressers I no longer needed, and sorted through mementos with a gentle detachment that surprised me. It wasn't about letting go of the past entirely, it was about clearing space for what was to come. Each night I lay awake with that mantra softly echoing in my mind, "Independence is my true horsepower." I could see the road stretching ahead, obscured by doubt yet filled with possibility. The silent decision I had made was a powerful one. Despite the world's attempts to label me fragile or diminished, I would remain a force, quiet, sure, and ready. The quiet was no longer a sign of surrender, but a shield. Behind it, a plan was born. Behind it, a future awaited, waiting for me to claim it on my own terms. The moment I fully embraced that quiet determination, everything shifted. Subtly at first, but undeniably. Reflection alone wasn't enough anymore. I needed movement, purpose, and a plan crafted with the steady hand of experience. The car was lost, but the years of wisdom and resources I carried within me remained intact, ready to be used. Among those resources was a secret I had carried for years, held close but untouched, the insurance policy my late husband had thoughtfully arranged long ago. It was a substantial sum, meant to protect me should the unexpected come. At the time, I never imagined I would need it to reclaim my independence, but now it was a lifeline. I spent long afternoons at my kitchen table, dusting off old folders with care, sorting through capers that reminded me of days balanced between hope and responsibility. Among the yellowed documents, the insurance policy glinted like a hidden key, one that might unlock a future different from the one Sarah and Mark tried to assign to me. Reaching out to the insurance agent was a moment of deliberate courage. I rehearsed the necessary words to keep the conversation clinical and focused. No room for pain or pleas. This was business, and I held the upper hand now. Her voice on the other end was calm and professional, a steady current beneath the undercurrent of my nervousness. The claim process is straightforward, she said, and can provide you with the funds you need. Her reassurance became a turning point. The possibility of financial support transformed my despair into quiet empowerment, as though a window had cracked open to fresh air. While the paperwork wound through its channels, my mind turned to practicalities and possibilities. I plunged into researching vehicles that promised freedom on four wheels: travel trailers, RVs, motorhomes. Worlds of independence and adventure bloomed at my fingertips through listings, reviews, and online communities. People who had reclaimed life through the open road shared stories that stirred both envy and hope within me. I imagined myself behind the wheel of a spacious RV, the hum of the engine beneath me, the horizon stretched wide and welcoming. This was not mere escape, but a conscious choice to steer my own life, far from the betrayal I'd endured and the suffocating walls of the house that had become cold and foreign. In this journey from memory to possibility, I turned to Clara, my oldest and most understanding friend. She didn't question or pity me. Instead, she shared tales from her years traveling, tales filled with laughter, challenges, and the kind of empowerment I craved. Clara encouraged me with gentle wisdom, urging patience but also action. Together, we navigated listings, compared models, and debated what would best serve my vision. Each potential purchase became a symbol, a promise that I was reclaiming control one careful step at a time. Her presence was more than companionship. It was a lifeline anchoring my resolve. Back home, the process of clearing space became as important as planning the future. Selling cherished jewelry was a wrenching task. Those pieces carried stories, whispers of my past triumphs and losses, yet parting with them freed a burden I hadn't fully realized I bore. I boxed up photographs and trinkets, organizing memories with a detachment born of necessity. This physical clearing transformed into a release of old grief and resentment. Packing belongings was no longer about losing the past, but consciously preparing for a future I would define. Clearing literal and emotional space was a lesson in strength and surrender, simultaneously hard and healing. In these weeks of quiet preparation, I reflected often on the life I had lived. I thought about the sacrifices made in silence, the late nights I held Sarah through her struggles, the peacekeeping amid family conflicts, the endless patience demanded by others' expectations. It was a difficult reckoning, acknowledging how much love sometimes meant enduring pain without recognition. Yet, beneath the weight of those reflections, I felt a fierce determination. Hope was no longer the naive fantasy of a fairy tale, but a pragmatic force built on knowledge and experience. To reclaim my life, I would need patience, not passive waiting, but a resolve steady as the turning wheels of the RV I envisioned. This resolve redirected my gaze inward. I became a vigilant observer of my own life, scrutinizing every detail for the opportunities hidden in loss. The supposed ending was actually a beginning, an invitation to transform myself from within. I didn't reject my memories or family, despite the wounds. Instead, I allowed the pain to become fuel for a new kind of strength, that earned through years of quiet learning, resilience, and self-understanding. Strength that is steady, not loud, a power that lasts beyond words or momentary victories. Every small step toward my goal felt significant. Each night, lying awake, I repeated the mantra quietly, almost reverently: "Independence is my true horsepower." The road ahead was still cloaked in uncertainty, but also brimming with possibility. The silent decision I made was powerful. I would not be boxed in by others' perceptions of my age or ability. I was a force, quiet but sure, ready to claim the life I deserved. This silence was no surrender. It was a shield and a strategy. Behind it, a plan was forming, grounded in patience and the discipline nurtured by years of resilience. My home, once a comfortable refuge, had become a battleground. not of raised voices, but of deliberate moves made with quiet assurance. I reached out discreetly to Joanna, the lawyer I trusted most. Her steady, no-nonsense approach grounded me. While I prepared to embrace this new life, she ensured my rights and assets were protected. Financial transitions, property matters, these were complex, but with Joanna's help, I felt ready to face them. The more I engaged in this effort, the more tangible my dream became. I saw myself opening the door of an RV filled with the scent of new beginnings, ready to set off on my own terms. It was more than travel. It was reclaiming autonomy, rewriting the story with a calm but unyielding hand. Through all this, my silence remained deliberate, not weakness, but power. I observed, planned, and acted carefully. The house that held years of love and betrayal was no longer my prison. It was the stage for a new act, one where I held the reins. With every document signed, every conversation in measured tones, and every treasured item given new purpose, I stepped closer to freedom. The insurance money was more than compensation. It was the foundation for my transformation. This was my silent revenge, not a loud clash or a reckless outburst, but a return of agency shaped by patience and wisdom. I was no longer sidelined or diminished by age or betrayal. Instead, I was creating a future fueled by independence. Independence is my true horsepower. I said it to myself nightly, a steady refrain that carried me onward. The days that followed were filled with steady, purposeful motion, each step deliberate, heavy with the lessons of a lifetime. After years spent bending beneath the expectations of others, of sacrificing myself for the sake of family, I was finally filling my lungs with fresh air, the kind only found when you choose your own path. Selling my jewelry was my first act of liberation. Those pieces had been my companions through decades of weddings, anniversaries, and milestones. Each starred a chapter in my life story, some gleaming with joy, others dulled by loss. Yet as I carefully wrapped and sent each item on its way, I felt a strange lightness. I was transforming memories into something practical, shedding old burdens and reclaiming power through release. The house began to breathe again, no longer a museum of the past, but a space unfolding towards the future. I moved through its rooms with reference and resolve, sorting and packing, giving away or selling what no longer served me. Dressers once overflowing with clothes I never wore emptied out, their contents folded or passed on to charity, all part of a ritual cleansing. Packing became my meditation, no frantic escape, but a thoughtful process of selecting what would journey with me and what would stay behind. Photographs and letters, acquired over decades, held joy and pain. I boxed some carefully for safekeeping, others I left in drawers and closets, letting them rest. This was not fleeing from my past, but choosing how to honor it, making room for new memories. The house itself seemed to sense the change. Walls that had witnessed whispered conversations, quiet tears, and occasional laughter now held a different energy, a watchful silence that both comforted and compelled. I walked the rooms, realizing that soon I would leave this place, its embrace and its shadows alike, to embrace a future uncertain but filled with hope. Meanwhile, the arrival of the insurance settlement was a tangible beacon. The money was not merely a transaction, but a reassurance that my late husband's foresight was a solid foundation beneath my feet. I carefully set those funds apart, a sacred reservoir to be spent wisely on the next stage of my life. With that bedrock in place, I reinvented myself as a seeker. Weeks passed as I explored options, reading RV reviews, comparing models, and scanning classifieds. I wanted a residence and a vehicle, a sturdy, manageable home on wheels that could be my sanctuary and carriage. It paled in grandeur, but aimed for substance and comfort. A place I could trust as my new refuge. Each detail mattered, from layout to gas mileage, from storage space to ease of handling. I imagined myself navigating winding roads, parkways, and byways, each mile a step toward independence and renewal. My connection with Clara deepened. Her stories of travels and the friendships she'd built on the road became a lifeline. She knew the highs and lows of nomadic life, the exhilaration and the solitude, and offered insight wrapped in warmth and encouragement. Her faith in my decision steadied my wavering moments and turned dreams into attainable goals. At the same time, Joanna, my trusted lawyer, lent her sharp mind and steady hand. Navigating contracts, property rights, and financial arrangements was no small task, but with her guidance, I felt equipped. Joanna protected my interests and kept me aware of potential pitfalls, especially concerning the family conflicts she anticipated. Her presence was a shield, both reassuring and empowering. The more I moved forward, the clearer my vision grew. I pictured the day I would open the door to my RV, breathe in the scent of fresh leather and pine, and take hold of the steering wheel. That vehicle would be more than a means of travel, it would be a statement. As the days progressed, I maintained my practiced silence. No shouting, no pleas, no desperate confrontations. My power lay in my quiet resolve, in planning and patience nurtured by years of experience. The house that once held my memories and heartaches was no longer a prison, but the platform for a new act, one where I was firmly in control. Then, finally, there was the moment I stepped inside the RV I would soon call home. It was modest but welcoming, with clean lines and sturdy build. The smell of new upholstery mingled with wood and fresh paint, a tangible promise of beginnings. Signing the sales contract was an act heavy with symbolism. Pen in hand, I was granting myself permission to move forward. The dealer smiled, unaware of the storm of emotion beneath my steady exterior. Relief, anticipation, and quiet triumph blending into an electric current. The keys slid into my palm felt like talismans. This was mine now, my freedom, my future. Returning home, I packed with care. Every item chosen for the journey ahead, essentials that served comfort, practicality, and spirit. Clothes folded neatly, mementos whittled down to what fed my soul. The act was as much ritual as preparation. Each bag placed in the RV was a reaffirmation of purpose. Saying goodbye to my house was bittersweet. The walls echoed years of love and loss, of whispered conversations and unspoken pains. Yet the goodbyes were silent, absence of tears replaced by quiet resolve. The house stood witness as I closed its doors behind me, stepping into the twilight of one life and the dawn of another. Leaving was not an escape, but a reclamation. Each mile ahead was a stitch in the fabric of the life I was weaving anew. This was my silent revenge, not loud, not brash, but profound and enduring. I was no longer a shadow of my past or a victim buried beneath age and betrayal. Instead, I became the architect of my own freedom. Every night, the same words echoed softly within. Independence is my true horsepower. With each sunrise over an unfamiliar horizon, I embraced my journey, not simply a physical one, but a voyage into a spirit reborn. The afternoon they returned, the air in the house held a quiet tension, subtle but unmistakable. Sarah and Mark stepped through the door, expecting routine, order, and a woman subdued by years of familial obedience. They anticipated the usual scene, me waiting quietly, invisible and compliant. But I was no longer that woman. They found something new, someone transformed by resilience and resolve. I stood steadily in the living room, calm and composed, each breath deliberate. The years of silent endurance had forged a strength they never saw coming. Their eyes caught mine, tentative and searching, unsure of who I had become. "What are you doing here?" Sarah asked, her voice a strained attempt at normalcy, tinged with suspicion. "I'm here to tell you that I'm leaving," I responded steadily. "I'm stepping into a new chapter on my terms." Mark's face twisted in confusion and irritation. "Leaving? You can't just abandon everything. This is your home." "It was my home," I said gently, but with steel beneath my words. But it's time for me to create a home that belongs to me entirely, a home that moves with me as I choose. I moved toward the coffee table and slid a folder toward them, a portfolio of evidence, bank statements proving the insurance settlement, the purchase agreement for my RV, and photographs of the vehicle gleaming under the sun. This wasn't reckless fantasy. It was a carefully prepared reality. Sarah's lips parted. Breath caught in surprise, and Mark's eyes widened as the weight of the truth sank in. They shared a look, one of dawning disbelief and unspoken trauma, the realization that the woman they thought fragile and dependent was now independent, empowered, and unbreakable. "You didn't ask me," I said softly, the hurt underneath careful control. "You sold my car without a word. You assumed age had made me less, that I'd surrender without fight." Mark shifted restlessly. "Mom, we only acted because we wanted what was best for you," he said, trying to justify their actions. "But best doesn't mean taken without consent," I replied firmly. "You underestimated me. You mistook silence for weakness. You thought my age meant I had no agency." Sarah's eyes shimmered with conflict, guilt, resentment, confusion all at once, but no words countered my truth. "We were protecting you," Sarah murmured. "Protecting by stealing my freedom?" I echoed. "You treated me like I was a child to be controlled, not a woman capable of her own decisions. That is not protection, that is betrayal." A heavy silence fell between us, laden with years of misunderstanding and pain. They had written me off as fragile and compliant, but here I stood whole and unwavering, a truth they couldn't deny. I held their gaze with quiet fire. "I created my life with hard work, patience, and love. None of it gave you the right to erase my voice. But from this moment onward, I reclaim my story." They said nothing, their defenses crumbling under the weight of that declaration. I gathered a few essential belongings with steady hands, the last physical claims to a chapter closing. Each movement communicated the transformation I had undergone, a shedding of the past, a stepping into strength. Before opening the door, I turned back to look at them. "I am grateful for the life we shared, but I will no longer live as a background character in my own story." Their silence was both acceptance and loss. No angry words, no tears, only the quiet acknowledgement of a boundary firmly drawn. Stepping outside, a breeze whispered through the yard, carrying away some of the heaviness I'd borne too long. The RV waited, a gleaming testament to victory and new beginnings. I settled into the driver's seat, the hum of the engine beneath me filling me with steady confidence. This was my home now, versatile, free, and entirely mine. Turning the key, the vibrations under my fingers were notes of triumph, an electric charge spanning decades of patience and endurance. Slowly, I backed out of the driveway, each inch a reclamation, distancing myself from years of pain and control. Through the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of Sarah and Mark standing silently, confronted with a reality they hadn't prepared for. Ahead, the road unfolded, majestic, vast, promising freedom unbound. Every mile was a stitch weaving together my new life. Threads of resilience and hope blending in each turn of the wheel. No longer a silhouette bound by others' expectations, I now stood as the architect of my destiny. Quiet strength guided me, carrying me forward into a future I chose. Behind me, sorrow and betrayal faded. Ahead, dawn and opportunity awaited, the horizon bright with possibility. My silent revenge was complete, not with shouts, but with steadfast courage. With each passing mile, I wove a life defined by my own design, where independence was the engine and hope the fuel. Every night, my heart whispered the truth I lived by: independence is my true horsepower. The road ahead seemed endless, illuminated by the golden slant of the late afternoon sun, and I felt a calm I had not known in years settle deep within me. Each mile I traveled carried the heavy weight of the past a little further behind, and with every turn, my soul grew lighter, freer. The RV hummed beneath me, a sturdy vessel for my new life. The sound steady and reassuring, a heartbeat in sync with my own. I watched the world pass by, landscapes shifting slowly from familiar suburbs to open fields dotted with wildflowers and distant mountains. The scent of fresh pine and earth drifted through the cracked window, mingling with the hum of the tires on pavement and the endless sky above. This was not just a physical journey, it was a reclamation of spirit, a rediscovery of self. For so long, my identity had been defined by others, by Sarah's expectations, Mark's dismissals, the silent judgments layered within our family home. Now, far from their voices, I found myself listening more closely to my own heart, to a quiet strength that had been waiting patiently beneath years of silence. I remembered the countless nights spent comforting Sarah through troubles I barely understood, smoothing over conflicts, absorbing pain that was not always mine to bear. Those sacrifices had shaped my life, but they never defined my worth. The betrayal I endured was painful, yes, but it was also a crucible that tempered my resilience. Now, loneliness was different. It was not an absence, but a space filled with possibility, the kind of solitude that invites reflection and growth. Under the vast, starlit skies, I sat outside the RV, wrapped in a soft blanket, the cool breeze whispering promises of renewal and peace. I allowed myself to feel joy again, the kind that swells quietly in the chest when the sun rises over an unfamiliar horizon, or when the gentle rustle of leaves accompanies my thoughts. The road had become my home, each new town a chapter, every mile a sentence in a story I authored with intention. The simplicity of life on the road revealed pleasures long forgotten. The warmth of a perfect cup of coffee brewed at dawn, the friendly nods of strangers who shared this transient existence, the satisfaction of mastering the mechanics of my moving sanctuary. These moments stitched together a patchwork quilt of freedom and healing. In the stillness, I found clarity. Independence, I realized, was more than physical movement or escape. It was the courage to rewrite my narrative, to step beyond the shadows of betrayal and reclaim my voice, soft but unbreakable. At times, memories surfaced, faces, voices, fragments of laughter mingled with tears. But I carried them differently now, not as chains, but as reminders of growth and strength. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer held the power to dictate my future. Each evening brought a quiet peace. The RV's cozy interior became a sanctuary of my own making, filled with simple comforts and the soft glow of fairy lights. As I lay awake, the gentle hum of the engine a lullaby, I whispered the words that had become my anchor. Independence is my true horsepower. This journey was more than miles traveled. It was a testament to survival, to the fierce dignity that comes with choosing oneself after years of being diminished. Age was no longer a barrier, but a badge of endurance and wisdom. With every sunrise, my spirit soared a little higher. The road unfolded endlessly, a canvas for adventures yet to be dreamed, friendships yet to be forged, and lessons yet to be learned. I was not just moving through space, I was moving through time, shedding old selves and embracing new possibilities. Freedom was no longer a distant hope, but the living reality beneath my hands on the steering wheel and the beating of my heart. And as the stars trailed overhead on my solitary journey, I felt with every breath and every mile that I was finally home.